right, everybody. Welcome to the first season of Below the Fold with me, Jason Widup, where I'll be interviewing SaaS founders on a range of broad marketing topics. This is a podcast all about two things. First, what kind of crazy it takes to be a serial entrepreneur. And then second, how can that experience of being an entrepreneur give us new ways to look at traditional marketing problems? On today's episode, I'm super excited to have Adam Schoenfield, CEO and co-founder of KeyPlay, very modern account research and scoring platform. Adam has definitely been around the block in B2B SaaS, from founding a social media analytics company called Simply Measured back in 2010. And yeah, I know there's some stuff before that. Selling it to Sprout Social, starting SiftRock and selling it to Drift, and now on to Pure Signal and KeyPlay. I've personally known Adam for about 13 years now, I think. I was a Simply Measured customer when I worked at Microsoft. And Adam, I think you might have been my CSM back then. I'm just kidding. But probably you're playing all the roles back then. I followed Adam's career ever since then, and we reconnected about a year plus ago when I brought KeyPlay into metadata as one of their first customers. So Adam, thanks so much for being the very first guest on my new show, and welcome.
Very kind intro. I'm honored to be your first guest. We have the 13-year quote is like making us seem old and all, but I'm good with that. I'm okay. I'm leaning into this. Some people call it like the geriatric founder if you're over 40, but I think it's super dumb because there's all these like great stories of histories, really successful founders that did it later in life, even later than 40. But yes,
we're
I'm glad we've crossed paths.
We're the protected class founder.
Yeah. That's right.
Nobody tried to fire Adam. Cool. So yeah, and we live really close to each other, which is kind of cool too. So about 20 minutes away from each other. This is in the Seattle area. Went hiking once, definitely planning on doing that again. So we enjoy some of the same things. And so it's kind of nice just, having other folks in the Seattle tech scene to do stuff with and to kind of, get together and do things with. So.
Yeah, we have a good community here. It's not as big as the Bay Area for sure by any stretch, but I feel like, like us, we've crossed paths so many times through multiple companies and roles. Yeah. And it's kind of fun like that because it feels smallish, but still like big enough. Like there's your winners, your high spots and your outreaches and the ones that are doing really well and your tableaus and things. So
tableaus. Yes.
Yeah. Yes. We have a good thing going up here.
Yeah, absolutely. So I guess let's go ahead and roll in. So the first part of this conversation is going to be about you and kind of why you became a CEO, why you became a founder, what kind of got you into that. Then we're going to roll into a marketing topic. And we're going to talk about targeting today because what better thing to talk about with you than targeting. So let's talk about the first time you knew that you wanted to start or run a company. So when was that? And maybe talk a little bit about that context.
Well, I think I was working in my first job, which was in management consulting. I was at a company called Lake Partners in Seattle, like a boutique management consulting firm. I was nowhere near a good enough student or proactive enough about my career to go to like a McKinsey or a Bain. I kind of got late to the whole, I want to go into business idea out of college. And I stumbled into this place and it was a great opportunity. I worked for some super smart people. The firm is still running and doing really well. And a couple of years into that, I started reading TechCrunch. I mean, it was so dumb, man. The things that made me want to do this, I started reading TechCrunch and learning about these companies. And I didn't really have a concept for what it was or what it took. I was just super naive. And there was a guy I was working with and we kind of bat ideas around and eventually sort of came to starting something together. And I think there's probably something in me, a bit of my personality or my values. Have you ever taken the Enneagram?
Yes. Which one is that? Does it result in
it's the nine numbers. There's Myers-Briggs, there's personality index. Anyway, the Enneagram one, I don't know, it kind of resonated for me. I'm the one, which is called the strict perfectionist, which you can imagine has some very distinct pros and cons, all of them. In every case, your strengths are your weaknesses. But I think as part of that, right, the one is you're always seeking improvement. You're always trying to find the right way, the better way to do something. Yeah. And that's always how I've been in different pursuits in my life. And I think there was probably something that intrinsically understood about starting companies that would feed that. And so I think there was that in there. And I'd kind of observed a few entrepreneurial people, my grandpa, my dad, people around me, the founder of the consulting firm I was working for. He was a great role model for me as well. So I think like a kind of things were probably floating into my consciousness and subconscious. And, then I just kind of like decided that was what I was going to do. I mean, I really knew nothing about what it took or how hard it was, or, I got woken up to that as I got into it.
Yeah, that's interesting. So how old would you say you were when you were in that management consulting role, when you kind of had that spark of that idea?
I mean, probably like my second or third year there. I left after 3 years. So I would have been 24, 25.
Okay. Yeah, that makes sense. And did you find yourself thinking, like looking at the leaders that you saw around you and thinking like, why do they do it that? Like, did you find yourself questioning them and like questioning their approach to business? Or were you more like, was it like, oh, I could do that so much better than they? Or were you just more like learning like, oh my God, they're so good at this and I'm just kind of sucking it in? Like, was it one of those two things at all?
I think the people I worked for, it was like, wow, I was more impressed with like what they'd been able to do. And it was, I wonder if I could have my own business in that way, right? Oh, I wonder what that would be like to kind of be the one at the helm, sort of setting the direction, figuring it out. Like I was curious, like what was the road? And then I started to read more about the tech world and, software companies and tech companies. I think I grew up like, I graduated college in 2005, and that was when Facebook was just, taking off, and that whole sort of social mobile wave was really starting. I had the first iPhone in 2007. I remember it so distinctly. I still actually have it in my desk drawer. I'm never going to throw that thing away.
Nice.
So I think I was like also getting interested in like, wow, there's people starting these apps and software companies, and wow, that's like a really interesting area. So I think also my excitement about what was going on in tech at the time, it looked like that would be like a place where you could go be an entrepreneur and be a young person really, and possibly, break out and have a success.
Yeah. And what was your degree in? Did you get a business degree, or are you an engineer by trade?
No, nothing that useful, man. I had political science, or at my school we called it government, which was like, you do that if you want to go to law school. I thought I'd probably, go to law school because people said that was a smart thing to do. I had no sense I didn't want to be a lawyer.
Yeah.
So I kind of got to the end and I took the LSATs and did all that stuff. And I was like, actually, I don't want to go to law school. Why am I doing this? So no, I didn't have any direction like this as a teenager or in school. It kind of came to me later once I got in the workforce.
Yeah. Yeah. Nice. Cool. So when you think about yourself in comparison to like folks or friends or colleagues that they're like just as smart as you, but not company founders, what do you think it's different about you specifically that drove you to being an entrepreneur versus like the paths that some of your friends or colleagues might have taken?
Yeah, it's an interesting question because I've hired so many people that I think are, when you say smart, I kind of like the way I interpret that word is like a innate intellectual ability.
Yeah.
At least that's my frame. That's probably, limited way of thinking about it. But like I've hired and seen people that are a lot smarter than me in like raw IQ. I've had like worked with people. So I think I'm like relatively bright, but I don't think I'm, in that like super elite, like probably couldn't have been let's see, AI researcher at OpenAI, right? Like that probably wasn't going to be me. Or, if Elon needed like the brightest mind to figure out how to get this like SpaceX thing to do whatever, I'm like, I don't know that I have that horsepower, but I think I have like a sufficient level. I think what I maybe have is I'm like able to be embarrassed. Like I have a pretty high threshold for embarrassment. I have a pretty high threshold for pain. I have a high threshold for ambiguity. And so I think those things kind of allowed me to both take the leap when I didn't really know anything. And then as I had failures or a mixed bag, I was able to kind of stay consistent and keep going at it. Because I think some people, you look at like Melanie Perkins or Mark Zuckerberg or like these really young founders, they have something, they lock into it. For me, it was much more, I failed a company. I had a company that was a bunch of ups and downs. It took me lots of iterations before I had anything that could be described as success. So I think it's more like consistency, patience, willingness, or ability to like be embarrassed and like get off the floor of the arena, as like Brene Brown talks about it. Probably that stuff that really has served me in being able to like keep at this.
Yeah. Interesting. I mean, and that must come from a pretty decent dose of self-esteem then, right? Because like you can't have those qualities and not have pretty good self-confidence, right, too, at the same time. Like, you can't stick with something a lot or take the embarrassment, you know what I mean? If it's like, if you're low on self-esteem to start, like, that stuff would be just almost.
I think that's right. Yeah. Or some resolve or confidence that you're going to figure it out. So I think I've had that. And I think like through my life, I've had a great life, but I've taken blows here and there, and like I've been able to go forward, at work personally. And so I think knowing that I can probably like I think it's with time, right? Like I believe that with time, I can figure out a lot.
Oh, nice. I like that. That's cool. Yeah. I've never been like one of those long-term planning people. I've always like, and you say you kind of like have that longer term, that's always been a struggle for me too, I think, or not too, but struggle for me, especially in my career is like, and one of the reasons why I felt like I would probably not be a good founder is because a couple of the things that you were talking about. One, I didn't have the best self-esteem for a long time. So I think had I had the first sign of rejection, I'd be like, okay, it's over. Like, all right, we're done here. Like, this is not meant to be. But yeah, I think it's really, it takes a lot, I think, to not be frazzled and not be turned into a different direction when you got all these people. And some people you're saying like, man, you really respect them and they might have an opinion and you still have to kind of stay headstrong. And it takes a lot of, I think, fortitude.
That's sure. Right. Yeah. I mean, you get so many no's, you're just so wrong so often. Like you're trying to really move the world or cause some change or disrupt some market or whatever it is, whether it's big or small, but there's a lot of competing forces that you have to like be able to work through. For sure. I mean, I've cried after meetings. I've like so many things over the years. Like I shut down a company. I mean, I just burned the investor money and completely shut it down. This is my first company, which you omitted from the bio, but like my very first go at it. So I've had like plenty of, let's just call them learning experiences.
Yeah. Yeah, no, for sure. So when's the last time you were an employee? Would it have been Drift kind of, I guess?
Yeah, Drift. Yeah. That was the only time. Yeah. That was the only time.
How were you? How was that being an employee? I'm kind of curious.
You'd have to ask my managers. I was probably a pain in the butt.
It must be hard though. Like, when you have this entrepreneurial spirit and just this drive to then just kind of, and I mean, you were obviously like, you had sold the company to them. And so you came in at I think VP or like a C-level role in there. So yeah, you already came in with, I'm sure, a bunch of respect, but what do you think it would be, how do you think you would, or how did it feel as an employee, or how do you think you'd be as if you didn't take that path and you were an employee? Like, how do you think that would, how do you think that would fit?
Well, at Drift, I learned so much from David and Elias, the founders. And David, like as a founding CEO, just had a different level of vision and product marketing thinking than I personally had in my past company. So I hope that I took some of those lessons and have been able to like internalize them and use them. So I learned a lot there. I think it was challenging to be out of the big chair, to be out of the driver's seat. I had to change my mindset sometimes. I'm sure I was probably a pain in the butt at times, and because of that, and probably also where I was strong and could add value was probably that same thing, right? Like I was kind of that founder mentality. So they put me on stuff like newer emerging products, or I kind of jumped around like onto different projects and things that just were more ambiguous. I don't know, man. I don't think about a lot how I would be because I just don't envision myself going back to that ever. Like I really hope that I can run this company for a very, very long time. Like I'm really taking this, Andrew, my co-founder, and I, it's like, it's not like how do we grow the fastest out of the gate, but it's how do we endure? How do we like make sure this thing is long running? Yeah. And I think that's what I'd like to do. So I think in the right situation, I think I could probably figure out how to be a decent employee. I'd like to think if I'm on the right project and I'm solving something that like gets me motivated and I feel like I can improve. I think that's the main thing. But I think I would struggle if there was much bureaucracy or a lot of process that I had to endure.
Yeah. I'm gonna throw you a little curveball. I don't think I sent you this question, but what's one of the main things you're working on to be a better just general leader or company, CEO?
Well, I told you my Enneagram is the strict perfectionist. And so the downside is that like I'm constantly seeking the right way, the better way, high standards, raising the bar, like improvement. What's next? What's the next milestone? Right. So the downside is that it can often come across as like judgmental, or the bar is just so high, it's unreasonable, or critical. Right. And so I'm trying to work on that. My team might laugh because they might say like, I'm like 1% better Right. And I'm working, some of the people I work with have been with me through multiple companies.
Yeah.
So they like re-signed to work with me again.
Yeah.
I think I'm trying to work on that, have a little bit more spontaneity, a little bit more flexibility, even like little things. Like I go on a lot of walks. Okay. And like I take the same route. I come out of my house, I take a left, then I take another left, then I take a right, and I go down this long straightaway. Then I loop around this one neighborhood, and I come back. And I have the headphones in. I listen to a podcast, and it's like, this is the way I walk. And I plan my week the same way. And Sunday nights, I clear the deck and I get ready. I have these like habits and systems in my life that I'm really somewhat obsessed with. And I think that's helps me be successful. And I'm trying to like soften it up a little bit, maybe have a little bit more give, a little bit more room for just creative space, thinking space, a little bit more maybe understanding and not necessarily like always pushing the bar up. So I think I'm trying to find like the right balance on some of those things. Still maintain the strength of it, but I can see where it can sometimes be a negative for the people I'm working with, or even for myself, or for my like what the long-term goals I have are.
Yeah, no, that's great. I mean, like one of the things I can kind of relate, because I tend, and this has just been like my whole life, I will see the negative in something first, or I'll look at something and I'll see like what didn't work first. And that's just my brain, my eye just goes right to it. Like, oh, this is 98% great. In some way, I just find that 2% that's like could still be improved.
Yeah.
And so I've had to really work at that, and I still am not great at it. But one of the things that I do is I'll start to write out, like somebody will send me something, I'm giving them feedback in Slack. I write it out and I go right into the negative, and I stop for a second. I put my cursor back into like right after the hey, and then I put something super positive in there, because I'm like, I know that's not the right way to do it. It's just to like go in and say like, hey, this is what's wrong. It's like, hey, no, this is amazing. 98% great. Here are a couple of tweaks, that I think I'd like you to make. And that's been a learning process for me as well, because I don't know what my Enneagram is, but I'm probably a little bit of that. Let it go a little bit, I'd say probably over the last couple of years, but not much. And then the habits thing, I am actually working with my counselor right now on trying to develop better habits, or more of a routine, I guess I'd say. I think after taking this role as a kind of advisor consultant, it gives me more flexibility, but then I think sometimes that can be a curse for me. And so,
oh my gosh. Yeah. You don't have somebody dictating like your whole day and all these meetings and OKRs for the quarter and board meetings, right? You have like each hour you probably have just like 100 things you could spend that hour on.
Yeah. And I could context switch, and I could do something. I could go for a walk. I could leave and nobody would even know, like there's so many things that I could do. And then like one of the main things was I just got out of the habit of putting work blocks in my calendar. And then all of a sudden I just got rampant with meetings. Then I started thinking, this sucks, and my mental health was suffering. And so I was like, I got to get rid of these meetings. So just getting into these habits. And so that's one of the things I'm actually working on too. And it's like across, not just professionally, but like personally. And can I make 80% of my week on a routine and like get a little bit more satisfaction, I guess, and just kind of live my life a little bit differently that way. So yeah, I'm going to give that a try.
Yeah, it's a balance, right? Like finding these, because the routines, the habits, the rules, they help you get where you want to go, and they help you get like into the mental state that you want. But then there's like an extreme case where it's like you've overbuilt it, and I find myself sometimes in that. It's interesting. I think a lot of people like maybe around our age have this
tension
and thinking. I don't know. Have you read Shane Parrish's new book, Clear Thinking?
No.
Oh, okay. Maybe I'll send you a copy. It's really good. It has some good stuff on this. I don't know if I'm a big fan.
Reading is actually something I need to get. I'm trying to build more of a routine around. That's one of the things I was like, reading, I want to do more of that. I'm not doing enough of it. And so
that's a good one. Like the reading, taking walks, those things pay so many dividends, but they don't check off a to-do. That's the problem, right? They don't move something toward your OKR, but they actually have like this huge compounding value. And they could put you in a better headspace, or like listening to music, or like all those things that you kind of eating right. It's like, have a good lunch. Like how many times have you just been like powering through work when you're a VP and you've got these busy deadline, you have like a shitty lunch.
Oh yeah.
Oops.
Yeah.
I don't know if hopefully we can swear on this.
This will have the parental advice.
Okay. I don't pretty much use the F word because I sound so weird saying it. It sounds like it comes out of my mouth and it like, I look and feel uncomfortable, but like,
at least you know that about yourself.
That's at least I can use like the PG-13 words without seeming too weird.
Yep. Now I got to figure out how to make this transition to the marketing topic. You know what I mean? Because like this stuff gets so cool and interesting. It's like, all right, how do I? So targeting.
Yeah, let's talk targeting.
That's one thing I'll have to figure out with this new podcast. But no, I think thanks. To close that section out, that was really cool. Thanks for sharing those insights. I mean, I think that's exactly what I was kind of hoping to get from this podcast. Is also I'm going to end up learning some as well. But I think a lot of people are just interested. There's this like sheen of secrecy. Like a lot of people when they're working at a startup or working at any company, really, they don't often have an opportunity to just kind of like have a conversation with the CEO or have and just like learn more about them or kind of learn more about what makes them tick or what made them like really be passionate about starting the company. And so that's kind of what I'm hoping to get out of some of this and just kind of show everybody like, hey, CEOs are people too, like just like they put pants on the same way we do.
Yeah.
And I think
sweatpants in the work from home environment for me. So.
I don't have any pants on right now, actually. That's my trick. And that's the way to segue to the marketing topic. The no pants. So cool. So today's topic on marketing is around targeting. And I love this topic because I think it just happens to fit so super nicely with you and kind of like your special skill sets around data. But I've always thought that targeting was like one of the most important things in B2B marketing that just also doesn't get enough. I don't think it gets enough attention. Like I see a lot of people talking about other things. I don't see a lot of people talking about how important targeting is. And maybe I'm wrong, but I just feel like it's one of the most important things. But I think maybe one of the reasons why people don't talk about it a lot is because people they don't know enough about it, I think is part of the problem. And then B, it doesn't feel like there's been a lot of change or advancement, you know what I mean? And like that kind of in that industry or around targeting data or just like, how do you target? And so people may have tuned out. And so that's what I wanted to talk about today is like the importance of it, what we think about it, some new and interesting ways to think about it. So let's start with an easy starter question. How is like traditional B2B targeting flawed? And so like what's been missing?
Well, I think a lot of the problem is that you come up with some idea of your ICP, and most people can kind of, what they can do is they can describe it, right? They know what good looks like. So they, they know it when they see it, and then they can show you like these accounts are not, and then the problem is then you go into your data tool and you have a gazillion filters and you go filter, this employees, this industry uses tech A, B, and C. And then you get like a list. And what that really is, I think, is your SAM or your TAM, like your serviceable addressable market or your total addressable market, depending on which filters you put on. And I think what you really want is like, you want that. Yeah. But then you really want to have like a gradient within that. Yeah. It's like, these are the best, these are kind of mids, and these are like we're not going to worry about those at this point. And then I think across that, you want to be able to segment it in ways that are relevant for you. So that might be like really granular categories. That might be like a certain activity that they're doing. That might be certain technologies that you're doing. So I think like most people just don't get down to that level of the gradient, like the scoring and then the segmentation. If you have that grid, you can do amazing things. You can get better ad conversion rates. You can like get your AEs focused, get your SDRs focused. You can get better at qualifying and picking what out of your inbound you want to work. So I think it's just like that translation layer from like what you can describe to what you can manifest into Salesforce or HubSpot is pretty messed up generally.
Yeah. Yeah. And my thought on this, I was thinking about this when I was thinking about this topic. In my mind, I think it's flawed because most people are still using just firmographic data, right? So they're using the basics of like industry, and maybe they're getting fancy with sub-industry, and then size using employees or revenue, location, maybe these couple of these other just like standard data points that we've had available for 20 years. But what happens is, let's say there's just not enough unique combinations of those things to give you like a solid set of companies to target that is different than everybody else's, right? So what I think it does is it just means we're all, even in different industries, all in B2B SaaS, we're all basically kind of targeting the same people because we just haven't given it enough difference. Maybe industry is the biggest differentiator in there, but most of us are still selling to like, other sales and marketing companies or B2B tech companies, that kind of thing. And so it just feels like we're all targeting the same people, and there's really not enough nuance in there for me to really get at it. And then like taking a step back, the reason it's so important is like the easy ones. It's cheaper, right? So like if you're more targeted. You're going to spend less money on ads because you're going to serve ads to fewer people. And you're going to ideally be more relevant to the people that you're talking to. So like through the segmentation you were talking about, or just by talking to a smaller number of people that are much more fit for what you're trying to do or communicate. And so yeah, anyway, I thought that was kind of
Absolutely. I mean, it's like there's so much leverage in that first step, because if you're going to then pick your personas on top of that, and then you're going to like have different messages and campaigns on top of that, and then you're going to have different channels and activities around that. Sort of like the center of this thing is like which companies in B2B, right? Usually start with like the companies. I think I learned this back at Simply Measured when we started to grow and we started to get to 5-10 million of ARR. It kind of got messy in the sales org, and we did an exercise where we actually like segmented into different verticals, and we like had priority accounts in those verticals, and things really started to click in some of those areas once we did that, because we had that focus, and everything like kind of cascaded off of that. So I've like seen that come to light. It was at SiftRock too. Once we locked into that, the best customer for us was somebody who was in the Marketo community, and we could kind of figure that out a few ways. That totally like changed the way we were going to market and where we were focusing. So I think it's a very high leverage strategic thing that often just gets glossed over, where you just like load up Apollo and you download a bunch of accounts, and then you're like, here you go, sales. Yep. Like we're good to go.
Good luck with this. Yeah. Hey, make sure you touch them all as soon as possible. You know,
yeah, like, right.
No prioritization or. Yeah. So, and then that kind of begets, there is different data available to people, right? For targeting and for account scoring and targeting and that kind of thing. And so I want to talk a little bit about that. So we've got the traditional firmographic that we talked about. And that's like just firmographic and demographic, just ways of describing things, factual things. I don't even know how to define firmographic, but just like facts about a company. You know, it's like, I don't know how it else.
Yeah, like the profile of the business. Right.
Like the profile. Basics. Yeah. Business profile. Then you have intent data. And the way I describe that is like, or define it, I guess, is these intent data providers are trying to give you a sense of like if somebody's researching your category or your company. So like they have intent to maybe look into this category or intent to buy something in this category. And then this third area that I don't know if this is defined or not, I call signals, right? And so this is like signals that isn't quite intent, because like it doesn't mean they're ready to buy, but they're different signals. And it's also not firmographic. It's usually behavior-based kind of signals. Like they do something, they did this thing, or they have this thing. And that's where I find a lot of people are familiar with the firmographic. They're familiar with the intent. They're not familiar with signals and like what can really be done with signals. And do you call them signals? Like, is that how you think about the world of kind of account data?
We do. Yeah. At KeyPlay, we have signals, right? Which are to us just kind of like true falses on an account. And so those could be things could be that they're hiring a marketing director. It could be that they are talking about SOC 2. It could, like a bunch of different things that we look for. Some that are more ephemeral and change often, and some that are pretty static, right? Do they have transparent pricing? Do they have a partner program, right? Like those are kind of things that we've looked at for different customers. So yeah, we think about it in signals, like an account signal. And there's so many different factors that you can look at.
So many different factors. And like the one I always talk about is the one I did at Metadata that you guys then took and basically optimized for me. And that's just counting the number of ads that companies had on LinkedIn. Because like for us at Metadata, we were selling an ad product. And so a big determiner is if you were in our ICP is are you spending money in ads? Because if you're not spending any money in ads, you have no reason to buy our product.
Yes.
There's no data source that I was familiar with that like could tell you this is, and mostly on LinkedIn. And like, this is the amount of money people are spending on LinkedIn. Yeah, you can get that for like Google paid search. You can get a proxy for it, but nothing for LinkedIn. And so I was like, oh, you can actually publicly see like what ads a company has loaded up on LinkedIn. And so if you count those, there are active and inactive ads. So like, you don't really know, but there was a correlation between the number of ads and basically the propensity to buy metadata. So that was really my first, and I would scrape for that data when I first started off LinkedIn. And then you helped me like basically productionalize that more through KeyPlay. But yeah, that's an example of a signal. It's like so meaningful to you as in your platform. Like you could really hang off of something like that. And if you can find the right signal, then like that can really be, I think, a competitive advantage for you when it comes to targeting.
Absolutely. Yeah. I mean, it's amazing how far you can get with a base layer too of good categorization of companies and kind of like a deeper profiling. But then I think you're right, for a lot of businesses, there's like a couple things you can find that you can key off of that will really hone it in or really like take it to the next level. So we always get really excited when we can find those things for people, like something that's hiding in a job post or on a privacy policy, or like you can crawl for a lot of these things. And then it's kind of about building a model around them so that you can track them, and you can use that as part of, like we talked before, so that you're not just filtering your accounts on some basics, but you're actually like stack ranking them and getting a sense for like, where should I focus my energy at this quarter or this year?
Yeah. Yeah. And, I promise this podcast is not a commercial, but I just love KeyPlay, and I've been using KeyPlay from kind of the beginning, I guess, but just, the way that you guys approach that whole signals piece, it immediately made sense to me. And I just think it was like, it was immediate. Like I was just like, immediately, yes.
Well, you were using before we even had a product, right? We were in it was like Airtable was our front end for those first 6 or 7 customers, because we wanted to really, prove it out, built the back end. Now we have a lot more, but
best way to start. Yeah, it's like early on. But no, and I brought you guys into metadata, and I recommend you guys to my clients because I believe in it. It's like, and I've seen it. I don't just believe in it, I've also seen it work. And so that's one of the things I'd say, like I always want to leave my listeners, which now I gotta get new listeners now, a new podcast, but with something they can do on their own to kind of advance in this area. And I think for me, from a targeting perspective, it's just think about these other things that would be really indicative. And like you said, Adam, people are really good at describing, like in just normal plain English, who would be a best target. Well, do that and literally put no guardrails on that thinking. So just have a pure brainstorm, just like, if I knew nothing about data or what data was available or not available, how would I best describe my perfect prospect? And then actually see, is it possible to turn one of these things into something that I can programmatically grab somehow or get a proxy for? It might not always be the greatest thing or the perfect thing, but there's often maybe a proxy that you might be able to find for that. And so, like another example from you guys is I had a client that was really in this demo automation space, and you guys had a signal around like product tours on a website. And it was like, that was such a clear, like nice signal for that client. And so just think about these signals, that just take it out of your mind of whether whether that data is available or not, and just kind of write these things down, and then start to think about like how you might be able to programmatize. I don't even know what operationalize something that data point.
Yeah, absolutely. I think there's a cheat code for this, which is you go ask your best AE and you say, what makes your eyes light up? Like, what do you look for? What are you going after? Right? Those are some of the questions we ask when we're trying to talk to a new customer to see if they're a good fit.
Yeah.
And it's like, if you talk to your AEs and if you get into the actual, like, I think of it like the rows, like a lot of people they live in the reports in Salesforce, but I like to go look at the accounts. I like to click in the websites and look at their careers page. I like to look at their LinkedIn, and I like to just kind of pattern match across that. And you can start to, I think stuff sort of bubbles up at that level when you really get into the weeds on it and really kind of look at it like one by one.
Yeah, totally. Oh, well, you said you want to play this company out. So I was going to ask you, like, what would you start next if you were going to start something right now? Is there a space that you're kind of like outside of the space that you're in? Is there kind of a space that you're interested in right now? You're kind of leaning into and think is interesting?
I think just we'll become more of like we're already integrating a lot of AI, modern AI, generative AI into multiple things we do. And I think we're just going to lean into that more and more. Which is, I think, the obvious answer. Like if you have a startup company, whether you're an upstart like us and you're kind of in the early stages, or you're into it, like, or Adobe, you're doing this. So that's probably like a non-answer, but that's for me what it is right now. And I think like that's what I'm thinking a lot about is like what, and I think a lot of people have done the obvious use cases, including us, but what are going to be those next like breakthrough areas where when you bring AI into this problem, you can approach it from a fundamentally different way, or you can like leapfrog where the market is today. Like those are the things that I'm excited to hopefully discover in the next couple of years, because I don't think collectively we've gotten to that. I think we've gotten to like the most natural, obvious ways to sprinkle it on top. So I'm like excited to find the next like big step functions.
Nice. Awesome. All right. Well, Adam, thanks again for being my first guest on my new show. And everybody, if you want to check it out, keyplay.io.
Yeah. couldn't get the .com, on a budget over here.
Awesome. All right, everybody. Thanks for listening. Hope to see you next time. Thanks, everybody. Cool.